Hi, I'm Maris, and until a few weeks ago, I truly believed my family loved me. But then my own brother, the CEO, suspended me and told me to come back when you're ready to apologize to your sister-in-law. I said, all right, and everyone smirked like they'd finally put me in my place. They didn't know that the real humiliation wasn't the suspension. It was realizing they'd been quietly cutting me out for years, steering deals away from me, hiding my work, whispering that I was unstable, and expecting me to just take it. And the next morning, when Celeste strutted into the office ready to gloat, she froze. My desk was empty. My resignation letter was already in the board's inbox, and the company lawyer came running, actually running, begging me to undo it because a $70 million contract was about to collapse without me. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it on your side? I'd love to know, because once you hear what happened next, you'll understand why that moment was the day my brother's smile finally disappeared. The morning had started like any other. Coffee in hand, shoes clicking softly on the polished floor of the elevator, eyes half watching the numbers rise. I'd always appreciated the quiet of that early hour before the office filled with noise and people needing things. It gave me time to prepare, to center myself. I remember adjusting my blouse in the reflection of the elevator wall, inhaling the scent of freshly brewed dark roast and floor wax. I'd rehearsed the pitch I was supposed to lead later that morning. Client renewal, $70 million contract, no room for mistakes. I was ready. At least, I thought I was. The moment I stepped onto our floor, Nia, my assistant, rushed over with eyes too wide for 8:15 a.m. Maris, Dorian needs you in the executive boardroom, now. Something about her voice, tight, uncertain, told me this wasn't routine. The boardroom door was already open when I reached it. Dorian was seated at the head of the table, arms folded. Celeste, my brother's wife, sat 2 seats down, legs crossed, her manicured nails drumming a rhythm of smug satisfaction. I paused for half a second, scanning the faces, but no one looked up from their papers. I took the empty seat across from them. Dorian didn't waste time. Effective immediately, you're suspended without pay. It took a second for the words to land. I blinked. Suspended? For what? He slid a single-page document across the table like it was nothing. There was an incident at the dinner Sunday night. You disrespected Celeste in front of family. I looked at her, then back to him. I asked her a question, a private one. Celeste leaned forward, voice soaked in faux concern. You accused me of manipulating your brother, in front of our parents, in front of guests. That's not private. That's not what I said, I murmured, voice low. You always act like you're the smartest one in the room, she cut in, with that grin she wore like perfume. Maybe it's time someone reminded you you're not untouchable. I turned back to Dorian. You're suspending me for something that happened at dinner, not at work? His lips pressed together. Maris, don't escalate this. I let out a small breath, sharp at the edges. I'm asking a question. Your tone is combative. Of course. I reached into my purse and pulled out my silver pen. It was a gift from a mentor who'd once told me, if they won't give you a seat at the table, write your own. I'd used it to sign every contract that mattered. I clicked it open. Celeste smirked. You cling to that pen like it makes you important. I didn't respond. I signed the paper. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden cold rush of betrayal. I stood. Dorian didn't meet my eyes. Outside the boardroom, the air felt heavier. People paused mid-conversation. I could hear the murmurs, the shuffle of people pretending not to watch. Nia took a step forward, but Celeste's voice cut through the hall like glass. Let's give her space, Nia. She needs time to reflect. I didn't stop walking. Just before I reached the elevator, Dorian called out behind me. "This is a family matter. She'll apologize and be back." It wasn't just a suspension. It was a public execution of credibility. Back at my desk, I sat quietly. The silver pen was still in my hand. I looked around at the framed awards, the post-it reminders from clients, the plant I kept alive through quarterly reports and late-night calls. I thought of the last 5 years, the deals, the loyalty, the countless times I swallowed my pride because it's family. And now, one dinner, one sentence. And I was the problem. There wasn't rage, not yet, just a quiet detachment settling in. Maybe they needed to learn what indispensable really meant. I gathered my things, slowly. People stared, but no one said a word. Celeste passed behind me, whispering just loud enough to another assistant. "She'll be back by tomorrow, probably with cookies." I didn't flinch, I didn't turn around, but I gripped that silver pen like a lifeline. And as I walked out of the building, a single thought followed me to the parking garage. If this was the line they chose to cross, then I had to decide how far I was willing to go. I didn't sleep that night because something inside me refused to stay quiet any longer. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the fridge and the occasional groan of old pipes expanding in the walls. I sat at the dining table, the lights dim, wrapped in one of Dorian's old hoodies I never gave back. Funny how, even now, I wore the things that once made me feel protected. The silver pen lay next to a blank notepad, its metal surface catching the kitchen light every time I moved. I kept replaying the scene in that boardroom. Celeste's arms folded like she was watching a comedy show, Dorian acting like he wasn't my brother, but some HR robot who had never met me before. It wasn't just their words that kept me awake. It was the speed. The way he didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even look at me like someone he once laughed with or leaned on during those overnight investor calls when Celeste had a migraine and couldn't be bothered. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. The soft buzz of my phone pulled me out of the spiral. I glanced down. "Nia, you okay? I saw something after you left." I didn't reply. I just hit call. She picked up quickly, whispering like she was afraid someone might hear her even through the phone. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but you need to know." "What did you see?" My voice cracked on the last syllable. "Right after you left," she started slowly, "Celeste went into the marketing bullpen. She was smiling, laughing, telling people that you finally got what was coming." I went still. "She said you were toxic, that you've been controlling the narrative for too long." Her words, not mine. She told them you needed to be humbled. My chest burned, not with fresh pain, but with clarity. Of course, Celeste never raised her voice. She smiled, played the sweet, composed wife. But underneath that smile was strategy. I had seen glimpses before, when she'd accidentally schedule over my presentations, or when she'd speak over me in family dinners while pretending not to realize she was cutting me off. I just didn't want to see it. I ended the call with Nia gently, thanking her. Then I just sat there, staring at that silver pen. 2 months ago, I stayed late prepping for a major pitch. Rhodes Financial, the one Dorian kept bragging, would put our company in the top 5 of our sector. I had spreadsheets, slide decks, research tied up in one folder on the shared drive. The next morning, it was gone. Celeste had been the last one logged in. She said it was an accident. Must have been the system update. Dorian waved it off like it was nothing. "Just rebuild it," he said. "It's probably better that way." I rebuilt it, of course. Worked through the night, pitched it flawlessly. But the seed had been planted, that I was careless, that I needed oversight. Back then, I let it go, for the sake of peace. Now, peace was a luxury I could no longer afford. Another buzz, another message, unknown number, no, not unknown, just not saved. Quentin Rhodes. Why weren't you at the meeting today? They said you were unavailable. I sat up straighter. I typed quickly, then paused, deleting the first draft of my reply. No drama, no bitterness, just honesty. There's an internal matter I'm handling. I'll update you soon. The typing bubble appeared, then vanished, then came back. Let me be blunt, he wrote. The deal hangs on your involvement. You've built the trust. If you're not leading this, we may need to reconsider. That was it. No fluff, no filler. Just the truth, plain and sharp. They hadn't told him. They'd buried my absence under some vague excuse. They knew the truth would make them look bad. I set the phone down. My fingers didn't tremble this time. I was past that now. In the quiet, I let the thoughts unravel, but this time not as a victim, more like a strategist surveying a battlefield. Celeste didn't just want me gone. She wanted to take what I built and rewrite the story with her name on it. And Dorian? Maybe he never believed in me as much as I believed in us, as siblings, as a team. Maybe I was always just a tool in his toolbox, useful until I got inconvenient. But I had something they didn't, the truth, and the trust of people that mattered. I turned toward the bedroom, the morning's light just beginning to smudge the edges of the sky. I could have collapsed into bed, but instead I opened my laptop. To Ambrose Lynn. Subject, suspension clarification. Hi, Ambrose. Could you confirm the formal terms of my suspension and access limitations? No emotion, no explanation, just business. He replied within minutes. Of course. Are you planning to contest this? I paused, then typed back just 4 words. Not yet. Thank you. I sat back. A strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not resignation. Something else, something colder. And as the sun started to rise, I realized something terrifying and liberating. They had pushed me out, but that meant I was finally free to choose what came next. By the time I walked back into the office the next morning, I wasn't the same person who left. But I didn't head straight there. I needed space, somewhere open, somewhere not built of glass walls and half smiles. So, I drove toward Buffalo Bayou Park, parked by the curb, and started walking with no real destination in mind. The air was crisp, the kind of quiet morning where the city hadn't quite woken up yet. A few joggers passed me, earbuds in, lost in their own battles. I moved slowly, feeling the weight of each step. But for once, it wasn't heaviness from fear or shame. It was clarity. My coat was buttoned tight and my hands were buried in the pockets. I felt the silver pen resting against my palm, cool, familiar, grounding. I used to walk here on weekends, back when Dorian and I would meet for brunch and talk about strategy and client retention like we were 2 halves of the same mind. Back when I still believed family meant something. Now, all I saw was the pattern I refused to call out for years. Dorian had always done this, shrugging off my concerns with, "You're reading too much into it," or "Let's not make drama." When we were kids, if I told him someone at school was mocking me, he'd laugh and say, "They're probably just jealous." If Celeste forgot my birthday dinner, he'd say she was busy. If she rolled her eyes at my ideas, he said I was being sensitive. It wasn't just yesterday, it was years. One memory came back so fast and sharp, I stopped walking. 3 Decembers ago, our company holiday party. I had just wrapped a big project early, and spirits were high. Everyone was gathered near the bar, sipping champagne and clinking glasses, dressed like they were auditioning for a holiday movie. I was talking to a group of clients when Celeste stepped into the circle, holding her wine glass like it was a prop in some performance. She smiled, wide, fake. You all know Maris is the emotional one, right? She's passionate, but sometimes that comes with fireworks. The group chuckled. I felt the burn crawl up my neck, but I forced a smile. I think that's called being invested. She leaned in, voice syrupy. Of course, sweetheart. We need your fire. Just not in meetings. More laughter. Not cruel, but the kind that says, she's got a point. I looked at Dorian. He was standing just behind her, sipping his drink. He didn't stop her, didn't correct her, didn't even look uncomfortable. He just said, Celeste is joking. You know how she is. Let's not get dramatic. But I remembered the way she looked at me, like a cat watching a bird after it clipped its own wings. It wasn't teasing, it was dominance, and I had let it slide, again. I kept walking until I found a bench overlooking the water. The sun had climbed higher now, warming the tips of the trees. I pulled out my phone, more from muscle memory than intention, just to feel normal. I tapped through old folders, mostly out, of habit. I opened my forwarded drafts folder, and there it was, an unsent email. A glowing note from a client, Eleanor Pierce from Whitmore Capital. She had written, Maris is the only reason this account stayed with your firm. Her attention to detail and respect for our timelines make her irreplaceable. I expect her to lead our next round. I blinked, checked the timestamp. 6 months ago, the day Celeste helped cover my inbox while I was at a medical appointment. The email wasn't in sent. It wasn't forwarded. It was saved, unsent. My hands tightened around the phone. I could feel my pulse rising, but not like before. It wasn't panic. It was exposure. All those times I wondered why praise never seemed to reach the right ears. Why Dorian started acting like I was just another manager, not a partner. Why raises went silent. Celeste had been hiding things, literally. She hadn't just made me look bad, she'd stolen my voice when people were finally starting to listen. My phone rang. It was Nia. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed to hear a voice that wasn't playing both sides. Hey, she said quickly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. I just wanted to check in. People are asking where you are. Celeste's been spinning the story again. I sighed, but kept my tone even. What's she saying now? That you're overwhelmed, that you needed time off, that you're unstable. I let out a short laugh. Unstable. That's rich coming from someone who can't stand not being the center of attention. Nia hesitated. I can talk to people, set the record straight. No, I said, gentler now. You have to stay out of it. You know how she works. A pause. Then Nia's voice softened. Just don't let them make you think you deserved any of this, okay? I didn't answer right away. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and let my fingers close around the silver pen. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't expensive, but it was mine. I bought it the day I closed my first big account. I had it engraved with one word, earned. Back in the car, I sat for a long while before starting the engine. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg for dignity in places that never offered it. I thought about all the years I stayed, not for the salary, not even for the clients. I stayed because I believed Dorian would wake up. That one day, he'd defend me the way I'd always defended him. But he didn't. And Celeste had never pretended. She played her hand openly. It was me who kept folding mine. So why was I still holding on? I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back wasn't soft anymore. She wasn't begging for space. She was about to take it. And for the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. One quiet thought that scared me with how right it felt. Maybe walking away wasn't losing. Maybe it was finally choosing myself. When I stepped into the office to clear out my desk, I realized everyone expected me to beg. No one expected what I was about to do. The elevator doors opened with a familiar chime, but the building no longer felt familiar. I didn't walk with the same pace I had every morning for the last decade. This time, I wasn't rushing to prepare for a meeting or brief a client. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was just here to collect what was mine. People noticed. They always do. Whispers buzzed like static behind me as I moved through the lobby. Heads turned, eyes flicked up from screens. A few tried offering quick, polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Half apology, half curiosity. I gave them nothing back. I stepped off the elevator on my floor and saw Nia near the break room. Her expression shifted the moment she saw me. Wide eyes, tense shoulders. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Not now. I didn't need the warning. I already knew. My desk was just how I left it. Neat, impersonal, efficient. But I could feel the air had changed. Conversations paused, keyboards stilled. Even without turning, I felt how people watched me. Some quietly hoping I'd make a scene, others praying I wouldn't. I slid my bag off my shoulder and began opening drawers, one step at a time. I packed slowly, deliberately. Framed photos, a few client thank you notes, the small paperweight I kept from my first deal. Last was the silver pen. I left it for the end on purpose. Of course, that's when she showed up. Heels clicked across tile like clockwork, too loud, too rehearsed to be coincidence. Celeste. She didn't even bother pretending she wasn't performing. "Well, well," she said brightly, drawing out each word as she leaned on the edge of a nearby desk. "Didn't expect to see you today. Thought you'd be home, nursing your pride." I didn't look at her. I kept folding my blazer into my box. "Did you come to beg?" she continued, louder now. "Because, Dorian might forgive you if you actually showed a little humility." Her voice carried across the room like perfume, sweet but suffocating. I still didn't respond. That must have rattled her, because she straightened up and walked closer, circling my desk like she was inspecting damage. "You really think this company needed you?" she said with a chuckle. "Dorian only kept you around because I asked him to. I told him family matters. I tried to protect you." I glanced up at her. Just once. She smiled at that. Triumphant. I didn't blink. Celeste wasn't subtle. She wanted me to lose control, wanted a scene, something she could point to as proof of instability. She had always been more interested in perception than truth. So I let her talk. "You should be thanking me," she said, stepping around my chair. "I covered for you so many times, cleaned up your messes, made sure clients didn't see the cracks. You've always had this emotional edge. It's exhausting, really." Still, I stayed silent. And then she reached over. She picked up the silver pen from my desk, rolled it between her fingers like it meant nothing. "This thing again?" she scoffed. "You act like it has value, like it's more than just a pen." My breath caught. Not visibly, but inside, somewhere deep. It wasn't just a pen. It was deals saved at the last minute. Contracts signed after hours of negotiation. It was the late nights, the early mornings, the client dinners where I had to smile through exhaustion. It was every ounce of worth I had built that no one else had given me. I stood up slowly. Celeste's smile faltered for just a second. I stepped closer than she expected. Her body stiffened. She was used to confrontation, sure, but only when she controlled the script. My voice was low, calm. "If you cross that line again, you won't like what comes next." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. She froze. Around us, the air felt still. I could see Nia from the corner of my eye, watching, barely breathing. Celeste blinked, then scoffed, trying to recover. "You're suspended. You don't get to make threats." I didn't flinch. I reached out, took the pen from her hand with deliberate ease, and placed it back in my box, without breaking eye contact. Celeste took a step back, barely noticeable, but it was there. She didn't have a comeback, not one that mattered. "You've always needed people to look smaller so you could feel taller," I said quietly. "I see that now." Her lips parted like she might respond, but nothing came. I turned back to my packing, calm, measured. She lingered a moment longer, then finally walked away, heels not quite as confident now. The room slowly breathed again. I didn't look around. I didn't need applause. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about reclaiming something for myself. As Celeste walked away, I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. This wasn't just a suspension anymore. It was the opening shot of a war she thought I'd never fight. I walked out of that building with my box in hand and my chin level. But by the time I stepped into the parking lot, the weight of the sun hit me harder than I expected. The humidity clung to my skin, and suddenly, everything felt too heavy. My clothes, the box, even my own breath. I got to my car, placed the box in the passenger seat, and sat down behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine. Instead, I just sat there, hands on my lap, air conditioning off, windows rolled up. The silence inside that car was louder than any argument I could have had. And then the tears came. Not loud, not messy, just silent streaks down my cheeks that I didn't bother wiping away. They weren't from that morning. No, these had been waiting years. They came from every meeting where I bit my tongue, every backhanded compliment, every time I gave more than I had and got less than I deserved. Minutes passed, maybe longer. I honestly don't know. Eventually, I turned the key, let the car hum to life, and pulled away. The drive home was slow, deliberate. I didn't even turn the radio on. Houston blurred by. People walking dogs, kids playing near hydrants, lives moving on without any idea mine had cracked in two. Back at my apartment, I brought the box inside and set it gently on the kitchen table. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Instead, I walked to the living room and sank into the couch, shoes still on. I tilted my head back and stared at the ceiling, letting everything catch up with me. I didn't even notice the blinking light on my phone until the sun had started dipping lower. A voicemail. I checked it. It was Dorian. His voice was low, like he thought this was a negotiation. "Look, you just need to cool down. Come back tomorrow, apologize, and let's move on. You know how Celeste gets. Don't blow this out of proportion. We'll fix it. You and I always figure it out." My mouth went dry. There wasn't a single word in that message that resembled concern. No, "Are you okay?" No, "This went too far." Nothing about betrayal or damage. Just business as usual. He truly believed I'd come crawling back. He expected it, counted on it. I tossed the phone onto the couch cushion and stood up too fast. The blood rushed to my head. I braced my hands on the kitchen counter and let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I looked around. On the wall was the framed certificate from 5 years ago, when I salvaged a crumbling client relationship no one else could manage. I'd worked every weekend that month, skipped Thanksgiving dinner, and Dorian hadn't even signed the congratulatory card. Near the entryway sat a shelf of family photos, holidays, weddings, birthdays. In every single one, I was off to the side. Smiling, yes, but slightly out of focus. I hadn't just been pushed aside at work. I'd been doing it to myself for years. A new email popped up on my phone. I hesitated, then checked it. It was from one of our senior clients, Quentin Rhodes. He forwarded me an email chain that made my stomach drop. There it was, the suspension notice. And right below it, a message from Celeste to him and 2 other partners. Her words were diplomatic, almost polite. But between the lines, it was clear. Maris has been exhibiting signs of emotional instability. We've mutually agreed she needs some time away from high-pressure responsibilities. Mutually agreed? Unstable? It felt like someone had kicked the air out of my lungs. This wasn't just a smear, it was surgical, targeted, cold. That email wasn't meant to inform. It was designed to bury me before I even had a chance to defend myself. I closed the message, placed my phone face down, and stood there in the middle of the apartment, not knowing what to do with my hands. I couldn't cry again. I didn't have anything left. My doorbell didn't ring, but my phone buzzed again. Nia. Her name on my screen felt like a rope thrown into deep water. I answered. "Maris," she said, voice soft but clear. "I just wanted to check in. I heard about the email. People are talking. Not in the way Celeste hoped, in the good way." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "I know you think you're alone," she continued, "but you're not. A lot of us see what's going on. We always have. We just didn't know how to help, and I'm sorry for that." I leaned against the wall and slid to the floor. "I can't do this much longer," I whispered. "You don't have to," she said. "Just don't let them convince you that you're the problem. You're not." She didn't hang up. She stayed on the line while I sat there, breathing. Slowly, it helped. Eventually, I told her thank you. She didn't ask for anything more. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The sky had turned a deep gray blue, streaked with orange at the edges. Houston always looked calm from a distance. I picked up the silver pen from the table and turned it in my fingers. It was just an object, but it felt like more. It reminded me that I had been the backbone of a department for 10 years, that clients trusted me, that I'd built something from nothing, and if they wanted me gone, maybe I should give them what they asked for, not out of defeat, not because they won, but because I was done asking for a seat at a table I helped build. And for the first time, the idea of walking away didn't feel like surrender. It felt like the only path to freedom. By the time the first rays of dawn filtered through my kitchen window, I was already awake. Not startled or groggy, just clear. There was a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not joy, not peace, but something steady, still. I brewed a cup of black coffee and sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, the silver pen resting beside it. That pen, same one Celeste had tried to reduce to nothing yesterday, had more history behind it than most people realized. And now, it sat beside me like an old friend, quiet and loyal. I opened a blank document and started to type. At first, the words came slowly. My fingers hovered, then tapped, then backspaced, then tapped again. I wasn't writing a farewell. I wasn't venting. I was building a statement. Something that couldn't be twisted, misquoted, or used against me. Clean, professional, final. I read through the draft 4, 5 times. Each revision was tighter, sharper. No emotion, just the facts. I didn't owe them my tears or my rage. When I was done, I leaned back and exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes when you finally choose yourself over everything else. It didn't feel brave, exactly. It felt overdue. I didn't hit send yet. I just saved it, sat still. My phone buzzed against the table, and I glanced over, expecting another message from Nia. But it wasn't her. It was a forwarded email from one of the junior partners I used to mentor, someone who still had enough of a conscience to warn me. The message was from Celeste. She'd already beaten me to it, again. In the thread, she'd written to the leadership team, saying I had left the building in distress, refused debrief protocol, and was likely to resign in an impulsive, emotionally reactive state. My hands curled into fists before I could stop them. She was framing me as unstable, dangerous, a liability. I recognized the tactic. It was classic Celeste. Get ahead of the story. Control the narrative. If you can't kill their reputation directly, poison the air they breathe before they can speak. And this time, she wasn't whispering. She was screaming it into inboxes that decided hiring and partnerships. I didn't pace, I didn't cry, I didn't call Nia. I opened my HR portal, uploaded the resignation letter, and added a simple note. Effective immediately. I will not be returning to the premises. Then I copied it to HR, Ambrose, and the executive inbox. I used no exclamation points, no dramatic flourishes, just language they couldn't touch. Grounded, calm, absolute. The moment I hit send, something shifted inside me. It was like taking off a coat that had never fit right. One I'd worn so long, I'd forgotten how heavy it was. 10 minutes later, the buzz of my phone returned, faster this time, urgent. 3 missed calls from HR, 2 emails from the Director of Operations, 1 short text from Ambrose. Call me ASAP. There are legal implications to this. We need to get ahead of it. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, poured the rest of my cold coffee down the sink, and washed the mug like it was any other morning. When I picked up my phone again, there was a message from Nia. "All hell just broke loose," she wrote. "Everyone thought you'd back down. No one thought you'd actually walk." I smiled. Of course they didn't. That was the problem all along. I had been so careful, so measured, for so long that people thought my silence was weakness. That staying calm meant I was easy to manipulate. But silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's just strategy. I turned my phone face down again and looked out the window. Downtown Houston was stretching into its rhythm, cars moving slowly through intersections, morning joggers wiping sweat from their brows, coffee shops starting to fill. And somewhere inside one of those buildings, people were scrambling. I could picture Celeste's face when she saw my resignation land. Not panic, exactly, but something close. She wasn't expecting to lose control of the story so quickly. Dorian? He was probably still assuming this was a phase, that I'd come back after cooling off, that I'd fold under pressure like I always had. They didn't know me anymore. Maybe they never did. I powered off my laptop and set it aside. Then I picked up the silver pen, held it in my hand, and let its weight remind me of everything I had survived. This wasn't just a resignation letter. It was the first door I'd ever closed willingly, without waiting for someone else to slam it for me. I held the pen up, whispered to myself, "It's time," and let the silence sit beside me like an old truth finally spoken aloud. And as the first call from Ambrose finally came through, I realized the real fallout hadn't even begun. I picked up on the third ring. His voice came fast. No pleasantries, no small talk. Just tension and clipped urgency. "Maris, we've got a situation." I didn't speak, just waited. One of the board members, Elaine McKay, forwarded me a string of internal emails. He said, taking a breath like he wasn't sure how to phrase the next part. "Celeste has been sending communications that might violate internal policy and possibly a few federal lines, too." My grip on the phone tightened. "She sent around your resignation before you even officially submitted it, framed it as a mental health issue, claimed you were unstable, unfit to lead major accounts, then copied in 4 clients without authorization." I closed my eyes. So this was how they played it. Ambrose kept talking. "It's not just inappropriate, it could create liability." One of the forwarded emails contained project intel, contract language, not hers to share. "What does this mean legally?" I asked, steady. "It means," he said quietly, "if someone wanted to file for defamation or breach of confidentiality, they'd have a strong case." Silence stretched between us. Then came the second wave. "Since your resignation," he continued, 2 clients raised concerns about Celeste's oversight. One flagged erratic timelines. Another mentioned being looped in late on deliverables you'd been managing. I didn't need to guess which ones. Ambrose exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding in more than just updates. We're looking at a potential hit to a $70 million contract if this isn't handled right. The board is rattled. Dorian's spinning. Of course he was. For once, I didn't feel afraid, just very, very clear. I need to send you something, Ambrose said. But heads up, Celeste just took it up another notch. Check your inbox. I opened my laptop. There it was. Subject: Urgent clarification for leadership, Maris Calder's departure. I clicked. The message was long, formal in tone, and utterly venomous in content. Celeste had laid it all out like a legal indictment. Words like emotionally unfit, erratic communication, deliberate withholding of project data, and destabilizing presence were scattered across the page like bullets. She ended it with, "It is imperative that leadership understand the full scope of Maris Calder's decision to exit the company and the emotional volatility that led to it." She'd copied the full senior leadership team, HR, even 2 board members. My stomach didn't drop, not this time. Because I saw it clearly now, this was panic, not strategy. My phone buzzed again. A text from Nia. Celeste just nuked the company inbox. Everyone's stunned. She went too far. I set my coffee down, reopened my resignation letter, and then clicked over to a clean email window. I didn't write much, just a few clean paragraphs. No drama, no anger. I attached a full work timeline for the 70 Mimeras account. Project handoffs from the last 6 months. Internal messages showing Celeste approved every delay. Screenshots of client feedback she buried. My original suspension notice and the language used. And the truth, all dated, all clear. I sent it only to the board and HR. No CCing, no forward bait. Then I sat back. Not 2 minutes passed before my phone rang again. Dorian. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Maris, what are you doing?" he snapped. "This is spiraling. You're making us look incompetent." I kept my voice even. "I'm not making you look anything. I'm showing what already was. You're blowing this out of proportion. Celeste was trying to protect the company. You owe us more than this. You've been here almost 15 years. There it was, the loyalty card. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. Then I said, "You suspended me without hearing my side because she demanded it. You watched her undermine me for years. And now that the consequences are real, you want me to play cleanup?" He didn't respond right away. "Maris." His tone had shifted, less sharp, more careful. "You know how things work. You've always known." "No," I said simply. "I knew how you wanted them to work." And I ended the call. For the first time, I wasn't shaking. 10 minutes later, a new message landed in my inbox, from a board member I'd never spoken to directly. "Maris, thank you for sending documentation. We were unaware of several points. We'll be following up shortly." Then HR. "Please be available for a discussion within the next 24 hours. We believe a review of internal communications is necessary." The shift was happening. Celeste's attempt to destroy me had turned inward. I glanced at the silver pen still sitting beside my keyboard. Funny how that little object kept showing up at moments like this. Not because it had power, but because I finally did. I ran my finger along its edge, thought back to the day Dorian gave it to me. "You'll need something solid to sign big things," he said, with that lopsided grin. Back when I thought we were on the same side, now, that pen wasn't a gift. It was mine, earned. I didn't need anyone to sign my future into place. I picked it up, felt the cool metal in my palm, and whispered, "This ends now." And just as I closed my laptop, a new email arrived, marked confidential from the chair of the board. The subject line read, "Confidential, immediate action required." And just like that, the quiet in my apartment turned into something else entirely. I clicked it open. My eyes scanned fast, then slower. The chair of the board, Margaret Alden, wasn't vague. The tone was stark, professional, stripped of any pleasantries. She noted that serious concerns had been raised regarding Celeste's handling of the 70 millimeter contract. Words like bypassed protocol, unauthorized amendments, possible breach of internal compliance, and misrepresentation of internal roles jumped off the screen. My name was referenced, my responsibilities twisted into lies Celeste had fed them. Margaret asked me to join an emergency meeting scheduled to begin in just under an hour. The board needed context from me. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was corporate liability, real, tangible, and possibly criminal. I sat still for maybe 30 seconds, just long enough to hear the hum of my refrigerator. Then I got to work. I pulled everything into one folder: emails, contract versions, meeting logs, even screenshots from our project tracking app. The silver pen lay beside my laptop, right where I'd left it earlier. I didn't even realize I reached for it until I was holding it between my fingers. This time, it wasn't to sign anything. It was to anchor myself. Every line I read, every timestamp I verified, reminded me of one thing. I hadn't imagined the betrayal. I hadn't overreacted. I had just been quiet while they built their power on my back. Not anymore. The meeting link popped up at exactly 10:58 a.m. I clicked in at 11 WoW sharp. 6 faces blinked into view. 2 women I recognized from board luncheons, 1 man I barely remembered from a retreat in Denver, and 2 newer members who looked as tense as I felt. Ambrose was already logged in, camera off, no expression. Margaret, at the top center, gave me a small nod. Then Celeste appeared, followed by Dorian. Celeste looked like she hadn't slept. Her makeup was thinner than usual, eyes slightly red. Dorian, on the other hand, looked furious. He leaned toward his camera like he wanted to crawl through it. "Before we begin," Margaret started, "we want to thank Maris for making herself available on short notice." But Dorian jumped in. "This is absurd," he barked. "We're entertaining a narrative written by someone who literally walked off the job mid-contract." I didn't flinch. She's been emotionally volatile for months, maybe years. Everyone knows she can't handle pressure. And now she's throwing bombs because her ego got bruised. Celeste nodded silently beside him, arms crossed like a defensive child caught lying. Margaret raised a hand. "Dorian, let's allow Maris—" But he cut her off again. "She wants to rewrite history. She was erratic. She missed deadlines. She ghosted clients. There are documented issues. This is a personal vendetta masquerading as professionalism." My hand never left the silver pen. When Margaret finally quieted him with a firm "enough," the silence that followed was thick, charged. I looked into my camera, then clicked share screen. "Let's go through the facts," I said, calm and even. First, the original contract Celeste tampered with. Highlighted in yellow were changes she submitted to the client without internal review. Ambrose's face twitched. He knew what that meant. Next, emails from our largest client showing confusion over deadlines Celeste promised them, dates I was never told about. Then, my own communication log, time-stamped check-ins, project updates, follow-ups, all aligned, all documented, all contrary to the story they'd tried to sell. Lastly, I showed the version of my resignation letter dated and submitted after Celeste had already told leadership I'd quit in a state of distress, no emotion, just proof. The room went still. Dorian's mouth opened, then shut. Celeste didn't speak. I stopped screen share and leaned back slightly. Margaret was the first to respond. "Celeste, would you like to walk us through why your version of the contract was submitted to legal before Maris's final review?" Celeste hesitated. "There was a timing issue. I assumed the project would be delayed if we waited. Did you inform procurement? She blinked. I thought it was implied. It wasn't, another board member cut in. A third voice followed. Did you flag the change with compliance? Celeste looked to Dorian like he could save her. He didn't speak. I stayed quiet. Because for once, the truth was louder than any defense. Margaret's tone shifted. Based on what we've seen today, there are clear breaches of protocol. We will initiate a formal inquiry and notify compliance. HR will follow up separately. Celeste's face crumpled. She didn't cry, but she looked hollow, like someone had opened the door to a room she'd spent years locking from the inside. Dorian clenched his jaw. His usual arrogance was gone. His fingers drummed against his desk, fast, restless. He looked like a man watching something slip out of his hands and not knowing how to catch it. Margaret turned to me. Thank you for your clarity and your documentation. You've given us more than enough to move forward appropriately. I should have felt triumphant. Maybe part of me did. But mostly, I just felt done. Before the meeting ended, I said one last thing. I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came because I was forced to choose between protecting myself or continuing to protect people who never protected me. No one responded. They didn't need to. Even through a screen, I saw Celeste's chest fall, like my words had knocked the air out of her. Dorian's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, in understanding. He finally knew I meant every bit of it. Then Margaret ended the call. I closed my laptop slowly, exhaling for what felt like the first time all morning. And just as the screen went black, a new notification popped up in the corner. Incoming call, Dorian Calder. But this time, he wasn't in control. The phone kept vibrating on the table, Dorian's name lighting up the screen again and again. For years, that alone was enough to make me drop whatever I was doing and answer, because ignoring him usually meant trouble later. But now, sitting in my own apartment with the remnants of the board meeting still echoing in the air, I felt none of that old pressure. This time, he wasn't in control. I let it ring until the sound felt intrusive, then finally swiped to answer. Not out of obligation, just to end the noise. His voice came through uneven, not sharp or commanding like usual. Maris, thank you for picking up. He paused and I could hear him breathe in, shaky. I need to explain something. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet stretch. Go ahead. I should have stopped this long before it got here, he started. I knew about the issue with the contract months ago. Celeste rushed through those revisions and He exhaled hard, like the truth cost him something. I figured you'd fix whatever she messed up. You always have. I didn't interrupt. He kept talking, almost like he feared if he paused, he wouldn't be able to continue. The board's considering removing her, and I know how that sounds. I know this is my fault. I should have handled it differently. There was a long, unsteady silence. Then, I'm sorry, Maris. I really am. I just didn't think it would go this far. It was the kind of apology people give when they're out of options, not when they truly understand the damage. And hearing it, instead of softening me, drew a line clearer than anything else had. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel vindicated. I felt tired. I kept my voice steady. Dorian, I'm done carrying what isn't mine to carry. He inhaled sharply, like he'd been slapped. You're not coming back. No, I said, almost gently. Not to the role, not to the dynamic, not to cleaning up after the two of you. He didn't argue, not immediately. I could nearly hear him sitting down somewhere, realizing that even anger couldn't get him out of this. I need you, Maris, he finally whispered. The company needs you. You can't just... I already have, I said softly. He tried a few more words, half pleas, half denials, but none of them held the weight they used to. I wasn't the same person who kept patching things up behind the scenes. I ended the call quietly, not out of spite, but because it was time. The room felt still afterward, like the air had shifted. I stood and walked to the kitchen for water, giving myself a moment to settle. My phone buzzed again, not Dorian this time. Email, the client. I opened it immediately, expecting more fallout, but the tone was warm, almost grateful. They wrote that they had been aware something was off with Celeste's communication. They said they appreciated my diligence and attention to detail. They included a short statement they intended to send to the board, acknowledging that the project had been saved thanks to my early intervention months back. It felt surreal reading recognition written plainly, without being filtered through Celeste or dismissed by Dorian. It was like a window had opened somewhere I didn't realize had been sealed shut. Then the last paragraph made me sit down. They extended a consulting offer, independent, flexible, remote if I wanted. "We value your professionalism and clarity," it read. "We'd welcome the chance to continue working with you directly." My eyes stayed on that line for a long time. Someone finally saw what I brought to the table without me having to fight for their attention, without me having to shrink myself to make room for others. I accepted, not quickly, not impulsively. I read it 3 times, breathed deeply, and replied with the same professionalism they had shown me. After sending it, I placed my phone down and looked at the silver pen on the table. The same pen Celeste mocked, the same one I had instinctively carried into every meeting for years. It had started as a simple gift from Dorian, before the roles and expectations swallowed us both. Back then, it was a small gesture of support. Then it became something I clung to, almost like it could remind me who I actually was underneath all the pressure. Now, it felt like something else entirely. A quiet reminder that I had always been more capable than they allowed themselves to see. I set it carefully beside my laptop. The afternoon light began shifting toward evening, and after sitting in the apartment for too long, I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The air carried that faint crispness that comes right before spring. I walked to the small park a few blocks away, the one I usually avoided because families gathered there and I'd always felt out of place. But today, it felt comforting, normal. Children chasing each other, dogs tugging at leashes, a couple sitting close on a bench sharing a drink. I found a spot under an oak tree and let myself breathe. Each inhale felt lighter. Each exhale felt like letting go of pieces I should have released years ago. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been. What lingered was something quieter, something steadier, the kind of strength that doesn't need an audience. As people passed, I realized something. I wasn't thinking about how Dorian would react next, or what Celeste might do. I wasn't rehearsing explanations or defenses in my mind. I wasn't trying to anticipate the next blow. For the first time, my thoughts belonged to me. Maybe this was what freedom actually felt like, not running away, but stepping toward something new with both feet on solid ground. I stayed at the park until the sun dipped low, warming the tops of the buildings with a soft glow. When I finally stood up to leave, I felt taller somehow. Not physically, just more certain of the space I occupied in the world. On my walk home, a single thought settled in like a quiet truth I had been circling for years. I didn't rebuild my life to prove anything to them. I rebuilt it because for the first time, I finally understood what I deserved.